Stand by. Is this thing on?
Yes, Dan.
Oh, hello.
You're listening to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
This just in.
Breaking news to report.
We are live.
Old newscasters
Can we just say former?
Sure. Former newscasters reunite behind the mic after more than 20 years.
Old news is good news.
Stay tuned.
Thanks for being with us for more Old News with Dan and Carrie. And today we have a really great guest for you. Somebody that some of you might remember from, way long ago. His name is Ken Syke. You might recognize this guy on your screen from the 1970s and 80s in Madison TV. And also he did a bunch of broadcasting over the years, doing play-by-play in color for things like this.
I'm Bob Bach.
And I'm Ken Syke, and together we'll bring you all the fast-paced, action-packed excitement of the Milwaukee Admirals.
At the Bradley Center and on the road, Admiral hockey is fast, ferocious, and fun.
When you look to exciting hockey, the puck stops here with the Milwaukee Admirals and Super 18.
Or you might remember him from his many, many years as the Madison School District's public information director. There he is with a particularly tough story with Tony Galley, one of those guys you don't want to see walk into the room. So he's with us now, and we are so happy to have him here with us. It's Ken Syke. Hi, Ken. Thanks for being with us.
Yay! Hi, Ken.
Hi. Good to see both of you, Dan and Carrie.
Great to see you.
too. Well, I mentioned way back in the 1970s, way back, right? So this is old news, right? 1970, I think you started in 1975 at WKOW. Was that your first TV job?
It was not, actually. I had 3 television jobs before that. You want me to go into that a little bit?
Tell us about
Yes,
it. Tell us
please.
about them for sure.
So without a journalism degree, I realized in my early 20s that I wanted to get into journalism and television. And I started out, and I know other people in Madison have done this. I started out at the TV station in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, which is part of the
WJFW?
Wausau market. Yeah, right. At that time, it was WAEO. Alvin E. Okonski had just come back from being in Congress for 30-some years, and he was managing the station.
Wow. Was
That was
Iron
my
Mike
first.
there still? Was Iron Mike the news director? Or was that before his time?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember Iron Mike. I was only there 1 year.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
It was great. I got a lot of experience, and I just thought, I really don't want to stay in a small market like this. And so then I got a job at a TV station in Dubuque, which was on for a short time, and had the unfortunate timing to be there when, unfortunately, it went belly up and literally shut down.
The whole station just went out of business.
Went out of business. They had some ownership. The same ownership had some financial problems.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, I don't remember. I think they came on after a few more months. This would have been in like the mid 70s, 74, I think.
Okay.
But we were all unemployed in the newsroom, and I was fortunate to get a job at actually a bigger market than Madison, the Quad Cities.
Oh, really?
I worked for WQAD TV there in Moline, Illinois, VC station, and did a lot of everything. I did some news and sports and kind of all kinds of things weekend. I didn't really have any connections to Madison, but another former ex-WKOW person who went on to national fame, Gary Bender, had been at Channel 27, and he left in 75 to go to CBS network. So it was a very big deal to go from Little Madison, Wisconsin. But Gary was very, very good. Mark Shapiro became the news director, and they needed somebody to do sports, and he and Terry Shockley hired me in the fall of 1975. So it was my 4th television job. And I remember when I moved to Madison, I'd been at 3 other TV stations for a short time. I need to stop moving so much. And here I am in Madison, whatever, almost 50 years later, 48 years later, or something like that.
Where did you grow up, and where did you go to college?
I grew up in upstate New York, Syracuse, New York. Went to college for 3 years in upstate New York. I was in a college seminary. in upstate New York for 3 years. Realized that wasn't for me, and then I got my degree at St. Louis University in St. Louis.
So you
Why
went
did
from St. Louis
Yeah.
to Rhinelander as your first
Actually,
job, or were there things in between?
there was one stop in between. I had a connection through college. I got into radio sales at in La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Oh.
And I was there again for a short time. And that's when I realized finally at age 23, it's like, I'd like to try this television stuff.
So that was your foot in the door into that business, at least.
Yes. Yeah, I got
Gotcha.
around radio a little bit, and it was a Midwest family station at that time, which is based here in Madison now.
Right.
And I did some sales for them, and I did some other sales. And I just realized after about, I guess it was about 9 months of that, it's like, sales isn't, it was my first couple of jobs out of college, and I was like, I'm not, sales isn't my thing.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before. Sales is hard. It's really hard. So people who do it well they have a lot of respect from me. That's
I think
for sure.
You have that sales gene or you don't, and I'm in the don't category.
Yeah.
And I realized that too back then. Yes.
So you came to KOW then, and that shot we showed from the promotional piece of paper right at the beginning of this podcast says Sundays at 10. How many days a week were you doing sports? Were you doing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? Were you doing every day of the week?
When I started, I worked 6 days a week.
Okay.
Really?
And believe it or not, we did not have a Saturday newscast.
Well, I was going to ask. Yeah, I feel like that is a newer innovation, in terms of news and newscasts.
That changed while I was there. So I was at WKOW from 75 to 86. And that changed, I don't know, maybe 5 years in, I think. We went to 7 days a week. But I was weekends. And I, being the number 2 guy, I was weekends. And when I started for, I think, 4 or 5 years, I worked 6 days a week.
So you said Mark Shapiro, he was the news director.
I'm sorry, he was the sports director.
Okay, he was the sports director who hired you in to be his right-hand man, basically. Yep.
Yes.
And then you were probably doing it all too, right? Were you going out and shooting film and doing editing your stories and everything?
Yeah, and those were the days of film. And it was film and all that processing and all that crazy stuff. Yeah. We didn't do with film. You didn't want to waste film. So if you were to do a stand-up, you always had a photographer there, because to do as you could do with video, you couldn't jump around in front of the camera. You'd be wasting so much film.
Right.
That if you did interviews or stand-ups, that had to be a photographer with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't even thought about that. And then you to come home and come back to the station, put it all together. I mean, it's so different now. And now the digital world has changed everything.
And we were one of the first, I'm not going to be able to know the specifics on this, but we were the first Madison newsroom that had videotape.
Yeah, that's what Greg told us too, Greg Sheevy.
It was a connection through Terry Kelly and the business that he had at that time. And we were almost like a test television station with, I think it was 3/4 inch video, wasn't it? Is that what Greg said?
Yeah, at first it was 3/4 inch, correct.
So.
Right, yeah. Okay. So, and I remember that was a big transition. Everybody was like, oh, this is great, so much better. Once we figured out the technology, it was like a whole new world. That was around 1980, I think, 81, something like that.
Yeah. Do you remember a young Greg Sheevy coming in with his long curly locks? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember Greg well. It's been great to see the people you've talked with, because many of them I know. I mean, I was there when we hired Jay Wilson.
Right.
Jay was our. Right. We had a couple of number 3s in the sports department, and before Jay, and I don't remember what happened to them, but Jay came on and was with us for a number of years, and so yeah. A lot of memories, a lot of great times at KOW from those days.
In your other markets, were you also doing sports, or did you just get into the sports in Madison?
I did sports. I also in Rhinelander, I did practically everything in Rhinelander except take out the trash.
You
And
did some
probably
wood
that
cutting on the
too as
side,
well
right?
sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I probably had to do that. I actually did weather for a while, and I
Oh,
actually
really?
took a meteorology course so I could at least know what I was talking about a little bit.
That's a plus.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I did. So I did news, weather, and sports in various
Hmm.
combinations at those other stations. But sports was my love, and sports is something that I really wanted to aspire to. And actually, Channel 27 was a real attraction because it gave me the opportunity, which something which I wanted to do a lot and which I got to do a lot over my career, and that was play-by-play sports.
Right.
To me, that was always very special, and WKOW at that time, and they still do. Well, they lost it for a little while. Have the WIA rights, and so we would do the basketball games and the hockey, and we even did some University of Wisconsin games. This was well before the Big Ten Network.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had Terry Shockley was great as far as being a big believer in sports, and we did University of Wisconsin, some basketball games, some hockey games. So we did a lot, and those play-by-play opportunities were tremendous. And we had the whole crew, Jerry Emmerich and all the production crew and involved in that because that was a big deal to do a live broadcast back then. You were talking about microwave signals and getting all the signals that way. It wasn't on the internet like it is now.
How would you prepare for the play-by-play? Like, would you have prepackaged stories ready to roll? Would you just have millions of notes? Would you research the players? Like, what went in before you did a Badger game of some kind?
Yes to all of that. It was a lot of preparation. The big thing usually was doing the pieces ahead of time because you had to fill the between periods. So halftime, or if you did a hockey game, it was 2 times because the ice resurfacing. And then for the WIA, we did a lot. We called them vignettes. And they actually still use that format with the WIA basketball tournament. They have to have things to fill between games and halftime.
Right.
And
And
we
I
would
love
do those
those
features. Yeah, those are great. We pulled them in from all over the state. So it was a lot of that. And then as far as the game itself, I learned from some people, Marsh and others, and just kind of was around it, that you did your homework. One of the things that I would give credit to Gary Bender for was that he was really good at pulling up tidbits of information about the players on the playing surface, the court or the field or whatever. And I believed in that too. And I worked very hard. I would put in for a typical game anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of just straight preparation, getting my boards ready, so that number one, you try to be familiar with the players. What number is what and what's the name,
Right.
and secondly, to have that other information of everything from statistics to background to when they were in high school, he or she is a member of the National Honor Society, and his or her sibling is also on the basketball team or whatever. All those little things that make it a little more special in the broadcast.
Well, and you mentioned you had those opportunities to do play-by-play, and you did a lot of it over the years. And then didn't you transition into doing more of that for like Wisconsin Public TV for, I think it was women's basketball and maybe men's basketball? I mean, I remember seeing you many, many, many times over the years on Wisconsin Public TV as well.
You're correct. You did good research.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Our correct research team.
I actually watched.
Oh, that's great. Actually, those were pretty popular at that time. That was before the Big Ten Network.
Right.
And Wisconsin Public Television would regularly run all the major Badger sports, Badger football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and men's hockey. At that time, there wasn't a women's hockey team. And yes, I did a lot. Deb Piper was the producer at that time, and she was my connection. And I did many years, and I don't know how many, I would guess maybe 15 years of doing, I did mostly women's basketball, and then we also did some volleyball too at that time.
Yeah.
And it was always almost always delayed. It was on that evening. The time slot, it was if the game was on like at 7 o'clock, we'd have it on the statewide television starting at 10:30 p.m. So it was the same night, and you were doing it live on tape, but it wasn't played live in most cases. There were a couple exceptions when Badgers made the tournament. So yeah, I did a lot of that, and had about anywhere from 7 to 10 games per season that I would be doing in the various sports. There were other people that did it also.
Yeah.
I did some men's hockey, but there were other people that did it too. I wasn't the only announcer, but we had a great time doing that. And then Big Ten Network started, and the sponsorships weren't quite there for PT, and they moved on.
Was that the era that you ended up leaving the station as well and went on to other things, or were you still at the station then?
I was my WPT time was after I had left WKOW. It was interesting. They weren't related, and there was an opportunity at WPT after I had left WKOW. I think I started in the late 80s. I left WKOW in 86, and I think I started with WPT like 87 or 88, and started doing games for them. And that's kind of when they started doing these tape delay games. They were really, I never did any of the football games, but they were really popular. The Badger home football games would always be on WPT, and they got a really strong rating on that.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I remember that as a kid, you know, you'd run home from, you know, high school back then, or if you had anything going on a Saturday, and after the late newscast, you're trying to stay awake watching the Badger games that night, and my dad would be asleep on the chair and I'd watch the game then. But those were the days, right, when you had to wait to see even if you knew what the score was, you had to wait to see what happened in the game. And you took that with you, I think, into the 2010s, right? I mean, you were still doing it until about 2010 or so, 2011. So that was quite a run. And obviously your flexibility kind of shows over the years. You've been open to doing a lot of different things. Your career kind of took you in a lot of different ways. So you were flexible, and you also, it seems to me, education was important to you, and the education of young people, since you went from broadcasting sports, and then you parlayed that into being a public information officer for the Madison schools. That had to be an important part of who you are, I guess, education and making young people be their best.
Yeah, that is. It's very perceptive on your part. I worked for, I think it was 12 years for the Madison School District, and was the main person for that. Although fortunately we had superintendents who were willing to go in front of the media, so it wasn't only me speaking to the media. I was dealing with them, but would often have the superintendent or assistant superintendents or even school principals deal with the media. Part of my job there was to help educators get familiar with dealing with reporters, and that was a big learning curve for them, and many of them did it very, very well. Yeah, that as Madison School District, and then my final employment before I retired a few years ago, I worked for Edgewood College here in Madison, and worked for the graduate school in professional development and some graduate school marketing. So I've been fortunate to work for them, and really the Madison School District was a very challenging, fast-paced, and interesting job. And I really got to see up close how difficult it is for teachers, educational administrators, superintendents, even school board members, because there's so much going on. It's happening such a fast pace. I'm still a big proponent of public education, not just the Madison School District, but all of it, because I think it does so much for our society and helps all children, no matter what their economic background is. It provides them the opportunity to succeed in their life.
Yeah.
How did you step into that role?
Well, again, it was just fortunate at that. So since I left Channel 27, I had 5 other jobs over this long career. And before working at the school district. I started that in 1999. I was at the Madison Chamber of Commerce and doing some economic development, and actually coordinated the start of a program called Leadership Greater Madison that is still going.
Yes.
Wow.
And
is that connected with the Wisconsin Innovation Network too?
Yes.
Was it?
Wow, I'm impressed, Dan. You know that. Yeah, I was running programs for the Wind Network also.
I remember that. Yeah, I think we had a conversation about that at some point in a past life. So
I think so.
Good memory, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah, we were doing some things that were kind of statewide there through a connection that our executive director had with the governor at that time.
Okay. Yep.
And our executive director at that time, Bob Brennan, had a bit of a relationship with Art Rainwater, who was the new superintendent of the Madison School District back in the late 90s. And they had an opening, the school district did, for somebody who could be the public information officer. And not that I had a connection to it, just that I found out about it that way and had to go through the full interview process and everything. And was fortunate enough to get that position.
How was it stepping on the other side of the microphone? Was it a big switch or not really, because you knew kind of how to handle it?
What I had to learn the most about, Carrie, and that's a really good question, was I had to understand the educational environment. I had not worked in public education before that. I understood the media. I'd been around Madison. I knew a lot of the reporters. I was familiar with where the landscapes were, the media outlets, etc. I had to learn about education and deal with that. And so, yes, it was a 180 flip. And one of the things that we did on a regular basis is that we provided some training and guidance to educators, principals, and others about how to deal with the media. And that was actually relatively easy for me to do, thinking like a reporter. Again, what I had to figure out was, well, what's important in education? What are the issues? And, privacy and student privacy and that whole educational world. So much information is available to the media and the public. And so you couldn't, but you didn't want to be, you wanted to be transparent as much as possible, because you're all dealing with public funds, public funding.
And weren't you a resource too for, I remember this, you might not remember this, but back when I was a reporter in Madison and I first came here and I was doing night sides and I had to cover a lot of school board meetings, you were a resource for reporters as well, who might have been newer to town or things like that, where I would go to you and ask you questions and you could give me some of that background. And that's an important part of a job like that too, correct?
It is. Yeah, it is, because there were so many issues that had a background, and I understood that reporters are covering different stories every day, right? And they didn't just specialize in education. And so a big part of the job was backgrounding reporters on the context. They're still going to do the story that they want to do, but at least giving them the background information and trying to help in that regard. And yeah, that was a big part of it, and it still is. If the public information officers are doing a good job, a lot of that work you never see it on the air or in print or online, because that's all background to try and help reporters do their job. And I understood that. I knew where they were coming from. I worked a lot with our legal department, because you have to be very careful about what is communicated. A school district can't be subjective at all in providing information to the public about referendums. It has to be factual information. And so we really had to be very careful there so that we didn't have any lawsuits come about because the school district was being subjective in what they were communicating. School board was a different thing. School board members could give their opinions because they're elected officials, but school district staff or school staff, we could only provide factual information, and we had to be very careful about that.
Did you enjoy that work?
I did. It was extremely fast paced, and sometimes we had some communication crises, but why did we get in the news business? We like fast paced things, right? And we like to be find things happening. So as many people say, you never knew what your day was going to be like. It could change just like that because of something that happened at a school or in the district or whatever. And the news part of me loved that.
Right. What spurred you to leave TV, Ken?
Again, a really good question. I'd been at 27 for 11 years, and I wasn't a Madison native. I wasn't married at the time. Hadn't been married, and yet I didn't. And so it was time to go to a larger market, and you would understand that. And it's like, I really don't. I like Madison. I think there's other things I can do with what I've had, my experience and everything. And so it was a commitment kind of to develop another career. I had no idea what was going to come next. Yep. But it just felt like, I've done this enough. Maybe it was a late 7-year itch or something. I don't know.
The 11-year itch.
Yeah, there you go. And so, yeah, it was just a whole bunch of little things, and didn't really want to leave Madison. I'd grown up in a mid-sized city, Syracuse, and I knew that mid-sized city is kind of where I wanted to be for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Madison is an awesome place to be.
Right. Madison has that way of sucking people in for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great place.
I imagine since you kind of grew into the role of sports, and doing sports broadcasting, you weren't the little kid who was running around as a little boy, pretending to broadcast a game or things like that, or were you?
No, I wasn't. As I said earlier, I really didn't have a clue what I wanted to do with my career until I was like 23 or 24 is when I finally thought, maybe I should try this journalism thing. And so no, I wasn't. But I knew once I got in those early television jobs, I wanted to see if I could not just do studio work, the 6 and the 10 and the 5 and all that, but play-by-play required a diligence and a preparation. It was kind of like having to do a term paper in a course. You really got to specialize in that. And what I loved about play-by-play was you never knew how the game was going to go. So you had to kind of go with the flow. Yeah. And so once I got into sportscasting and journalism, I thought, boy, if I could find an opportunity where I could do also some play-by-play. And that's what attracted me the most about WKOW. At that time, they were already known, even in the 70s. In fact, I believe that when WKOW and the other Wisconsin TV network stations were doing the boys, and we did the first girls basketball tournament. We did that. We did all, how many games were there? I think it was 13 games or 16 games, something like that, even from the first year. We were one of the few in the whole country that did all the state basketball tournaments, both boys and girls, at that time. So that was a big endeavor, and we were one of the few to do it. So no, I wasn't one of those younger people, but once I got into it, I was like, boy, if I could do play-by-play. And then to have that opportunity to do play-by-play for many years, part-time, I was still working full-time doing these other communications jobs. And then also working for WPT. In fact, one of the funny things, for a number of years, I was working at the Madison School District, and then would go literally walk across the street from the Doyle Building on Dayton Street, walk across the street to the Kohl Center to do a game that night. I didn't even have to move my car.
You're like, I'm living the dream.
That's right.
Well, and I would think doing spot.
Yeah. Doing play-by-play, I would think would prepare pretty much you for anything, any job, anywhere. I mean, you have the discipline to do the planning, the work ahead, everything that goes into preparing for the game, but then to have that ability to pivot and shift and to be present and to just report live on what you're seeing in front of you. I mean, that's not easy. That's not easy to do. And to have both things in your hands. I mean, I would think you would be able to literally do anything after doing that.
there are so many. You're right. I would agree with you very much so. And what I learned soon after I left full-time journalism was I saw the skills that we as journalists and ex-journalists had to develop. I saw how well that translated over into so many other jobs. One of the other jobs I had was working at the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce. I worked with a number of really outstanding businesses in the Madison area, and I saw a lot of different people in a lot of different areas. And I thought, a lot of the skills we learned as reporters translate so well. Yeah, you might not know about a particular business, but whether it's marketing or communications or so many other areas, just communicating that we learned as journalists translated over into so many other areas. And that was one of the messages I would tell people all the time who I would come across who were occasionally. I had people come to me and I'm thinking about changing out of journalism. I'd say, hey, you are better positioned than you know for what's to come. You just need to find your niche and your organization to be with. I remember at the Madison School District, I was always open to people coming into the area who wanted to network. And some of them would be ex-reporters, others would be PR people. And I would always take time for them to just come in, and I'd take their resume and we'd talk about Madison and talk about things. So it was more not young people, but more professionals who were thinking about career changes. One of the neat things I did at the Chamber of Commerce was coordinated a program. We had a thing called the Business and Education Partnership then. There's another thing I hadn't thought about that. There was education even in my Chamber of Commerce job. Right. But we would bring in business people from the community and speak to 8th graders all over the Madison School District. They'd have a career week, and we'd have people come in and speak about their careers because 8th grade is an important time in curricula for students to start to think, even in 8th grade, to start to think about what do I want to do for my career.
Yeah, right.
I was just listening to our episode with Sandy Kowal today before talking with you, and she said the same thing. That's what kind of put a bug in her ear to go into photojournalism, because someone from the news station had stopped by. And, it's just something, just those little sparks, you never know when they're going to happen. And to have professionals stop in, it makes a huge difference.
I haven't listened to that one yet, but Sandy was great. I remember working with her at Channel 27 also, and I know you worked with her, Dan. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. How young people figure out careers. I was always jealous of the people who would say, I knew from 4th grade what I wanted to be growing up. And I was like, man, I didn't figure it out until that was so much later. And, and there's even people who you'd meet in their 30s. I'm still trying to figure out what career is best for me. And it can change over time, too.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Evolution for sure.
You guys are examples of that, too, right?
Right.
Right.
Well, and I would say that's kind of a common theme with a lot of the people we've talked about and talked with in Old News, is that a lot of us have a lot of different interests, especially if you get into journalism. You have a lot of different interests that pull you in a lot of different ways. And journalism was a good kind of a funnel point where you could get a taste of a lot of different things. And that was a good job, a good career path for many of us. And then, like you said, you're able to build some skills and turn it into something else down the road. So I always tell people who've asked questions to us about, why journalism, and the state of journalism is much different than it was when we were getting into journalism today. But over the years, it was always a good starting point. I think for people who might not know exactly what they want to do, but you're learning skills like writing and speaking and researching and all of those things that you can take into other positions with you.
Meeting deadlines and working as a team and all the things.
Yeah. There are so many. And, I'll say this for our listeners and viewers, and you guys know about this, but we have a group of ex-WKOW persons from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even beyond that. And we get together about once a year, as we can. And it's fascinating to see all the different things that people have done, including you guys and others, what
Mhm.
they've done, if they've gotten out of full-time journalism, what they've done with those skills. It's been amazing to see, because until a few years ago, we hadn't connected with a lot of those people, but to see what people have done, and they were all, some of them were on the floor crew.
Mm.
Mhm.
That's when they had, camera persons and everything, and they went
Yeah.
on to executive positions in communications or broadcasting or various other things. Um, so back in those days, and I'm sure it was true at the other television stations, when people got out of full-time journalism, they seemed to do very, very well wherever they went, and in a variety of different things. Again, what appealed to them, and where they could find something that really was of interest to them.
When did you start Syke Communications?
That was between jobs.
Mm.
There were some times in there where I was between jobs and didn't have anything particularly going, and so I did that to kind of fill the gaps
Mm-hmm.
when I was generally looking for work. But I thought, well, I can use some of these skills. So that would have been, boy, I'm gonna have to really think about that. I think it was perhaps after my school district. Yeah, it was after my Madison school district time.
So were you
Um,
consulting, or what would you do for people?
oh, it was a variety of things. I did some consulting with
Mm-hmm.
corporations. It was very part-time.
Mm.
Um, and it it was about a year and a half where I was trying to do some things there, and then I was fortunate. Then I also worked for, actually, on a part-time basis for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction,
Yeah.
helping them with some communication things. That was almost like, I was like Psych Communications then, but it was a part-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to work, get a full-time job at Edgewood College. So, and that's by that time at full time, and I didn't have time for the other site communication
Mm.
stuff. So plus I
Mm-hmm.
was also doing play by play then in there too. So I never really developed that much, Carrie.
Oh.
But it was, I have a lot of respect for people who run independent companies, um, kind of like Tweedy Productions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to try and navigate that world where you're marketing yourself as well as trying to do the work, because that's
Mm.
difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but a good way. I mean, what a smart thing to on your part, just to have that as your tweener business as you're finding your next step, to just continue using your skills and helping others in the process.
And as it turned out, that Psych Communications led to some connections, which led to some jobs. So just by being out there, you help your
Mm-hmm.
chances also.
Right, connecting all the dots.
Are you fully retired now, Ken, or are you still kind of
Yes.
keeping you're taking it easy now, or you're probably still doing stuff?
I wouldn't say taking it easy. I am fully retired.
Yeah.
As I've said to some people who've asked me about, going back to part-time work, it's like, well, financially, I don't have to, so I don't think I'm going to. I have enough other interests
Yeah.
to pursue that I'm plenty busy in retirement. So yeah, I'm fully retired. Both Jackie, my wife, and I retired in 2020. We had planned it even before the
Oh,
pandemic
really?
started.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Oh,
Um,
coincident date.
yeah, actually, we both had to work in the pandemic world for about 3 months, but we
Mm.
had targeted mid 2020 as our retirement. And then we really laid low for the first couple of years. So really, only in the last couple of years have we been doing the things that we wanted to do. And for example, I'm taking I'm senior auditing a course at UW-Madison, which you can do for no
Mm.
charge. It's a wonderful opportunity that's possible at all the UW schools. And
Oh.
I love it. I'm taking a course now, and I took a course last semester. And here's the thing: you don't have to take exams. You don't get graded on it. You can just go to the lectures and enjoy it, and you're done.
What
I would
course are
like
you
to
taking
do
right now?
that. Yeah, tell us more.
What are you taking right now, Ken?
I'm taking a course on the history of Poland and Czechoslovakia when they overthrew the socialism, the USSR back in the late 80s.
Oh, cool class. Yeah.
One of our sons, we have two sons that are in their 20s. One of our sons is living and working in Prague in the Czech Republic.
Oh, wow.
And that partially drove my interest in that. And then it's a course that's offered as part of that. And there's a symposium like tomorrow that I'm going to go to. And it's just a stitch to be walking around campus long after my 20 some years, and to be going to a course with my backpack on with all the other students there on the Madison campus. It's a blast.
That is awesome. Now you're inspiring me. I want to do that too, especially the no exams part, that you just go and just
Right,
soak
yeah.
up the knowledge. That's
Do you get any
really
double
cool.
takes? People look, oh, who's that guy?
Actually, they do. When we asked, when the seniors, and I'm in with a couple others, and the professor in this particular course welcomes questions from the senior auditors. That's a faculty member choice. And sometimes we'll ask a question and we'll see all these students turning around saying, who are these people asking these questions? Somebody else asked me, how do you know who the senior auditors are? And I say, well, you just look around. It's the hair color that tells you who the senior auditors are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
That's really
boomer.
cool.
Yeah. That guy's asking all the questions. Yeah. That's really cool. What else do you do for fun
cool.
then, Ken? I mean, obviously you're auditing class. What else? Are you traveling, anything like that?
Not a whole lot of traveling. Just about to start up here. I'm in the Madison Senior Softball League. There's a softball league for seniors out in Verona. Channel 27 has done some stories on that. And a lot of reading. Retirement's been great because I am reading books now. Yeah, and I never had the time to do. I know it. Can you imagine that? Yeah. What a concept. Yeah. And what I'm interested in, not things that I have to read. And so I'm doing more reading. I'm more physically active. I exercise just about every day for at least a half an hour, various things.
What do you like to do besides softball?
I like to jog. I jog a couple, 3 miles a few times a week. We have a small swim spa in our backyard, and we use that. In fact, we're going to be putting the water in that pretty soon for the spring, and we do that quite a bit. Both Jackie and I do that quite a bit.
Is that one of those resistance pools where you're swimming in place? That's pretty cool.
Swim in place, or you can put tethers on you, tether straps on you, and you don't even have to worry about the jets. Then you can just swim against that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Our neighbor has one of those, and she was telling me the first time she turned it on, she was shot across the pool because she wasn't expecting the big burst.
Reminds me of the Jetsons. Jane, get me off of this thing.
Fortunately, it doesn't go over my head, so even if I get tumbled over, I can just get on my feet and I'm not going to
You just stand up.
Right, exactly.
Those are great.
That's cool.
Hey, Ken, I always ask people what was their first, their worst, and a job. Obviously, you're not thirsting for any more jobs, so let's leave that one up. Your first job, and it doesn't have to be in broadcasting. What was your first job ever? I'm kind of curious.
Well, first job ever, I delivered, there it was, there's journalism again. I delivered the Syracuse Herald-Journal afternoon newspaper in Syracuse, New York, in a suburb of Syracuse, actually.
So were you on your bicycle or walking with your bag?
Both. Would bike from block to block and park the bike and deliver the papers. This was afternoon newspapers, right? And just about every house in the neighborhood got one. I mean, it was, I'd say easily 90 to 95% of the homes on my route got the afternoon newspaper. And delivered that. And, probably should have figured things out, because a lot of times I'd stop and read what was on the newspaper because I wanted to know what was going on in the world, even as an 8th grader.
Did you have to collect too? Did you have to collect from your customers?
Yes.
How did you like that?
That was a pain.
Yes.
Yeah. How would you catch everybody? I mean, gee.
That was the challenge. And you tried to do it on a certain day or two. I usually did it on Thursdays and Fridays, and it was hit or miss. And you'd have people that you wouldn't catch for 3 or 4 weeks. But at that time, we were independent business persons. And, we get the newspapers from the distributors, but then we got the money from the customers, and we had to pay the distributor, per paper or whatever. And what
Yep.
was left over was our profit. So we were, young business people at that time trying to make a profit.
Yeah, you were motivated to collect that money.
How about your worst?
It came out of your pocket if it didn't, right?
Yeah.
How about your worst job, Ken? What was was it that?
No, that was
Nope.
that was pretty good. I had some cool
That's fun.
jobs in college that I liked. Actually, for 2 summers, I delivered mail during college. That was a great job. It was a great summer job.
Cool.
Yeah. Probably the job I didn't like the most, and I mentioned it earlier, but I had 2 jobs in lacrosse. One, I was in radio sales.
Oh yeah.
And then I got into selling cable television door to door.
Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah. That
like
was
the vacuum
again,
cleaner guy.
Yeah,
Oh,
really,
boy.
really. Except
Yeah.
at least you were a local company. I mean, it was still,
Yeah.
it wasn't like it was just some company. It's like, we're the cable television company, but still it was very difficult. And that was the second sales job. And like I said earlier, that's when I realized after about 4 months of that, I thought, there's got to be something better out there.
Yeah, sales is not your thing. Yeah. How about, Mike? The question I like to ask people are bloopers. Did you have on-air bloopers that you still maybe remember or chuckle about all these years later?
Yes. Well, we had a bunch of them. I'll tell a story. Thank you for asking that. I'll tell a story. It was at WKOW, and I won't mention who it was because it was a classic. It was a Sunday night newscast, and our weathercaster was doing the weather, and he had just started his first part of it, and suddenly he threw to a break, and through the commercial break, and we went to the commercial break, but they didn't clip his mic right away, and he thought he was off. He was off camera, but his mic was still open. He said, "Somebody quick, get a bucket."
Oh no.
Yes.
Oh no.
He was sick to his stomach.
Oh no.
Fortunately, they cut it off right after that.
I was going to say, did the audience hear the aftermath?
No,
Oh,
no,
thank
they
goodness.
didn't. And they didn't. And I'll mention the other person in this. I was doing the sports then, and Patty Lowe, who was another ex-WKW, she was doing the news, and she heard this, and she came running back in. I think she was off the studio. She was nearby, and we had to fill what was the rest of that weather segment because the weathercaster was elsewhere.
Occupied. Yeah.
Good thing you took that meteorology course in Rhinelander.
Yeah, really.
I didn't. I was ready to jump in, but yeah. And we had so many phone calls that night, and then the rec station. What happened? Is he okay?
He doesn't happen to still be working there, does he?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, we got that one off the list.
Not Bob.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. I overlapped with Bob. No, it wasn't Bob. It was not Bob. That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
He probably would be familiar with that story because if he wasn't there then, he would have been there shortly after that happened.
Okay. Interesting. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at least it wasn't you.
Yeah,
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, Ken, anything
That's
else you wanted to add before we get going here? Because I don't want to keep you. I don't want to keep you all day.
Well, it's been so much fun to remember. One of the fun things, I just say this, one of the fun things that I did at 27 that wasn't play-by-play was I was a big proponent of participatory journalism, and I'd always kind of wanted a parachute to jump. And so one spring and summer, we did a whole series on the training and the preparation, and then my first parachute jump. We did it for sports.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we did it out at Seven Hills Skydivers Club, which is between Sun Prairie and Columbus.
Yeah.
And we did it, spread it out over many weeks. But before we started the series, we did it on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and it was, at 10 o'clock. Before we started it, I'd already jumped. And I knew that I'd had a good result and jumped a few more times after that, because people were like, oh, you're going to, as it started running, they were like, are you going to be able to do the jump and everything? It's like, I've already done it, but don't tell anybody.
Ah. And did you do it again after that?
I did. I did about 10 jumps
That's a lot.
on my own. In fact, when you're learning at that time, they do it differently now, but at that time, you did the ripcord. The plane actually pulled the chute open as you were falling away from the plane as you started. Oh. But everybody who did that said, no, you really want to do a parachuting when you actually pull your own ripcord. It used to be like right here on your chest. Mm-hmm. And so I did a number of jumps till I got good enough to be able to do that, and then jumped a couple times just on my own. And I thought, this is great. I don't need to do it anymore. And so but I can say I've parachuted, about 10 times.
Yeah, I can't think of anything I'd like to do less than that.
That's 10 times more than I ever would.
So awful to me. I think I'd just pass out in the air, and who knows if I'd ever wake up. That's literally awful to me. But I know people love it. I don't think that's
there's some people that do it all the time.
Yeah.
And we kind of did this series. We just kind of did it on our own. I know Greg said sometimes we just do stuff, and sometimes management wouldn't know about it. And then they found out about it, and they were getting all these questions. Is Ken going to really jump out of the plane and everything? So we started doing more and more promos, and we really got a lot of people. It was over about 3 times a week, and I think we did it over like about 5 weeks. So it was like 15 different reports, and we really got a lot of people interested in it, because it was like,
I was going to say, Seven Hills probably was very happy to have you out there, because it probably was a great bump for their business.
It was. Absolutely. They were very happy about it. Yeah.
And it's reassuring, like, even if you have a little inkling that you want to do something like that, to see how you go through the training and how you learn and all the steps that lead up, then it's like not so scary when you go try something new.
Well, and the training was a big part of it. And that's exactly right. And they have specialized instructors and safety was absolutely number one. And so I felt very trained every step of the way. And so that, yes, it was scary. I'm not going to say that, but you felt prepared, because they, at that time, and I'm sure it's still true, they prepare you very well.
Well, Ken, I'm glad you survived all 10 of those jumps, because you wouldn't have been here today to be on Old News with Dan and Carrie, and we're really glad you were with us today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun, and I salute you guys so much for doing this, and continued good luck in doing this program.
Thanks for tuning in to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
That's Old News for now.
Join us next time.